we all knew going to Greenland that you would have a lot of downtime. The mission was not super busy. It was very, very remote. I mean, we're so far north that you couldn't even see the northern lights because the northern lights would be south of you. It was really cool. But so we had a lot of downtime while we're there. And so they would go around and be like, what are you going to do with this year? You know, and in my head, I brought my guitar with me. I'm like, I'm going to play the guitar, you know. Maybe read a book or something. I hadn't really figured out exactly what I was going to do, but they go around the room and this one guy stands up and he says, I want to read the Bible in the whole year, you know, this year. I want to read the whole Bible. And I was like, that's what I'm going to do. That's exactly what I'm going to do. I brought my Bible, I had it, and I ended up doing it 3 months, and I probably read it twice the whole time I was there.
Welcome back to another episode of The Jesus Shift. Let's just jump right in. Right. So we're on the second take here because the first one got corrupted. So Josh, why don't you just start by introducing yourself?
Sure. So I'm Josh, Josh Shepard. So I'm originally from South Carolina, married. We got married in 2021. Yeah, so whatever that comes out to, 23 years, 24 years. I don't know. I can't count it up, but we've married a long time, it seems like. Very blessed to have an awesome wife that I do, Rachel. We have 4 boys. Everybody used to ask us, do you want to try for the 5th? And I said, no, I don't want 5 boys because we only know how to do that. But we have 4 boys. The oldest is 23, 16, 15, and then our youngest is 9. He'll be 10 next month. So yeah, very blessed, and that's me in a nutshell, I guess.
Awesome. Yeah. You're military too, right?
Yeah, just retired last year, 20 and a half years-ish. So yeah, I was air traffic controller, did that for 20 years. Didn't go a lot of places, got to go on a couple deployments here and there. But yeah, just retired last year, so moving on to the next phase of life, whatever God's got for me. So
awesome,
which has been kind of interesting the last year, but you know, on this Veterans Day today, as we're recording this, it's kind of interesting. Yeah, so it's cool. Yep.
Cool. Well, thank you for your service.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah.
All right. Well, why don't you start at the beginning?
Yeah, sure. So. Growing up, I was born into a house where, you know, very, very blessed, mom and dad, but they didn't have, God wasn't a very big part, I guess, of our household growing up. Mom and dad, born again, saved as far as I know. I mean, they've told me they went to church as kids. They grew up in church families. But for me, I didn't see a lot of God in our house. You know, it was really, I wouldn't say that God was absent. It just wasn't a focus. It wasn't a priority in our house necessarily, I think. Maybe we'd say a prayer every once in a while before we'd eat dinner or something like that. But very seldom do we ever go to church. I could probably count on my hand on 1, maybe 2 at most, the amount of times I remember my mom and dad being in the church. And so it was just something that they didn't believe they needed to do and go to church. So on the other side, my grandparents on both sides, my grandmother on my mom's side, more or less, she was very much into the church, and her husband, or my grandfather, he didn't go to church. It was not his thing. But on my dad's side, my grandparents, they were very influential and kind of, I wouldn't say making sure I went to church, but they just sort of, I guess I would call it, they were just there for me and encouraged it and afforded me the opportunity really to go to church more growing up. So it was sort of a contrast between my parents and my grandparents growing up. I just remember from a very early on age, like my dad was a truck driver. He was on the road a lot. Mom, they both had, both my parents, they were about 20 years old when they had me, so they were young. And so I don't know if they really knew exactly what they're doing, and what parent does know what they're doing when they have their first one. I was about the same age when I had my first son, and I certainly didn't know what I was doing. So my mom would say that we grew up together. And so, again, she was 20, probably getting ready to turn 21-ish when I was a baby. And so, again, just kind of grew up. Mom was awesome, Dad was awesome, but Dad was on the road a lot. So, again, God just wasn't necessarily a priority. The house that I like to talk about, like the house that I grew up in, it's a very loving house. There was always love there. I just remember my parents at a younger age, when I was little, there was a lot of fighting. Again, they were kind of growing up, trying to figure out marriage, all those things. So it was a little bit different. You go to my grandparents' house, again, on my dad's side, that's where I grew up a lot, or spent a lot of my time growing up. just because I loved it there. It was just a different environment. Again, my house was great, but it was just different. You know, this was partying and stuff. Parents they were young. They had their friends over, drinking, smoking, and stuff like that. And I enjoyed that as a kid. It was awesome. It was fun. It was nothing bad. It was just when I'd go to my grandparents' house, it was just different. It was just calm. It was more a loving environment. It wasn't as much going on. So for some reason, as a young kid, I didn't like loud noises. I didn't like a lot of stuff like that. And so in any case, I just kind of liked the calmness of my grandparents' house. And so Sunday mornings, they would come pick me up to go to church on Sunday mornings. And so I just remember them driving up in the driveway Sunday morning, and mom and dad would get me dressed, and I'd go to church, and it was what I wanted to do. And so I grew up in the church a lot growing up. But again, just sort of that contrast between grandparents and then my mom and dad, or, our house, I guess. Probably as I got a little bit older, growing into my I guess 10 years old, something like that. Maybe actually probably a little bit younger than that. I would go to my grandparents on the weekends' house because that's where I wanted to go. I'd go to their house on Friday and I'd stay until Sunday, and then I'd go home, and then I'd stay at home all week. But when I was with my grandparents, we were going to go to church. There was no question about it. That was what their thing was. They were going Wednesday night, we're going Sunday, we're going Sunday night. If I were going to be with them, we were just going to go to church. And so, again, I just enjoyed being with them. And I think a big thing of it was, they were older. They had my dad and his brother. There was only two of them. They were 16 years apart. So my dad, I think I went back and did some math, and I may be wrong on it, but my grandparents probably would have been in their early 40s, I guess, maybe, when they had my dad. So they were older. So by the time I was born, they were probably close to their 60s. Oh, wow. So it was a little bit, again, a lot different. They had already raised two boys, and so I guess I wouldn't say that they had it figured out, but they kind of knew what it took to raise a kid, I guess, and my parents still sort of trying to figure it out. So as we go on later on, again, probably 9, 10 years old, going to church on Wednesday nights and very involved in the church and stuff like that. But I think it was going back around 11 years old, I think, is when I finally figured out that I needed to be saved. I remember we used to go on Wednesday nights. We would have this thing called Royal Ambassadors. And it was this program for young men growing up in the church. And so Wednesday nights, it was our Royal Ambassador thing. And it was just this one Wednesday night where we're sitting there, and I'd believed in God, knew some Bible story, grew up in the church for the most part a little bit, going with my grandparents. But somebody told me, it's like, well, if you haven't been saved. And I was like, well, okay, I'm still going to heaven, right? And they're like, no, you're not going to heaven if you haven't been saved. And it just kind of rocked my world. I was like, that's not, what? I thought I was going to heaven. I've done everything I'm supposed to do, I believe. All those things. And they're like, well, no, you haven't been saved. And so I remember that night just going out, and I don't remember the guy's name, but I know his face. I don't know if he's still around or not, but he took me out. We had a gymnasium where we met at, and it was like upstairs, and was where our classroom was at. And he took me out, and we kind of sat on the steps, and that was the time I actually prayed. Again, I think I was probably like 11 years old maybe, and prayed and received Christ. And it was just this overwhelming just calmness and peace that I have never felt ever to that point. And so I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that I was saved in that moment, like the Holy Spirit washed over me. And I didn't understand it at the time. I didn't know what it meant, really. I just knew that I was just trying to go to heaven. That's all I knew. I just didn't want to go to the other place. And it was that moment where I knew I was saved, but the enemy really, really came on strong at that same time. Again, 11 years old, through puberty, girls are starting to catch your attention, and other things are starting to catch your attention. And again, I just grew up around, I wouldn't say it was not a bad family, but I heard language from friends and cousins and things like that. And so, of course, I was well versed in some of those words. And as a kid going to church, we would play basketball Wednesday nights before church. And so it was like the very next week or 2 weeks after I'd been saved, we were out there playing basketball. I'm just cussing, just acting stupid, and one of the kids, I just remember them saying, like, didn't you just get saved? And I was like, yeah, and it still sticks with me this day. It kind of bothered me. As I look back, I just know that it was Satan, the devil's he found out. He's like, hey, I'm losing, or I lost him. and I really need to get back into his life. And so we just really started attacking. And I kind of started the point where I think it started veering away from church a little bit more. It was maybe a few years after that, starting to get into teenage years where now the girls are more important and friends are more important. And so church wasn't a priority anymore. I get to sixth grade, I don't know how old it would have been, but I met my best friend growing up. And he grew up in a household that was completely different from mine. His household, they were very, I wouldn't say strict, but they had to go to church on Wednesday nights. They had to go to church on Sunday. And so growing up in my household where it was like church wasn't a priority to meeting him, where he had to go to church, it was kind of like I felt bad for him, and so he was a bit more of a rebel sometimes, I guess, because maybe he was trying to rebelling from his parents. And we go to middle school, and we're just a bunch of jerks when we go to middle school. I mean, 7th, 8th graders, it's the worst age ever for boys and girls. But I think it was my 7th grade year, we'd become good friends, and we didn't hang out a lot during the summers and stuff. I had my two cousins. We were almost exactly 1 year apart. We're all born in April. My older cousin, he was born in 1980. I was born in 81. And then my next cousin, he was born in 82. We're all in the month of April, 1 year apart. So my 7th grade year, we're just being little idiots, and we're going like on vacation, and we figure out, hey, if we start stealing stuff, we can get stuff for free. And we would go to the store with money in our pocket, but we're like, I want to keep my money and I want the stuff too. And so we just started out. My older cousin, we kind of just figured out at the same time. We didn't really necessarily talk to each other and say, hey, let's start stealing stuff. It's just, for some reason, we just kind of figured that out, that if we stole something, we started out with stupid little stuff like stealing pens from the grocery store or something. You're like, oh, cool, I can get stuff for free, or candy, whatever. And so we kind of started doing it together. And that summer, we'd go to the beach. I remember going to Myrtle Beach. We go to Myrtle Beach every year. Grew up in South Carolina, the upstate. And Myrtle Beach was where we'd go on vacation. And my dad had gotten a camper, and he would take the camper down to the beach in the summertime, and it would just stay there for like, I don't know, 2 or 3 months. And the families would go, different families, both sides of our family would go, and they'd go for like a week, and they would pay for that week or whatever. Well, so it would work out to where I'd get to go to the beach like maybe 2 times that year. I'd go with my parents, and my cousin would come with me, and then his parents would go, and I'd go with him. And so it was kind of cool. Well, we'd gone with my parents down to the beach, and we were just like, we're just going to steal whatever we can. We didn't care. We stole so much stuff, it was just ridiculous. Just stupid. And I just remember going to Sam's Club, I think it was, and they used to have an aisle of just cartons of cigarettes. And we just go down there, and you could just open them up, and we'd stick them in our pockets, and just idiots, And but I think it was towards the end of that summer, maybe the school year was getting ready to start or just had started. We had figured out, hey, we could steal cassette tapes. I know I'm dating myself a little bit, but we figured out we could steal cassette tapes from Walmart. And they had like this big giant plastic thing on them, and that was supposed to keep you from stealing it. We figured out a way that we could take that plastic thing off, and we could just stick the tapes in our pockets and leave. Well, we had gone to Walmart earlier that day. Me and my older cousin, we had gone. And my parents were going to, I think they were going to do something that Saturday night. They were going to the races or something. And usually that would have been something I would have wanted to go with my parents to do. But I was like, oh, we're going to get free stuff. And so we had talked our younger cousin into going with us. And we're like, hey, we're going to go to Walmart. We're going to steal some stuff. So earlier that day, me and my older cousin had gone to Walmart. We got some stuff. We'd gotten away with it. And so we go back later that night, like, again, a bunch of idiots, thinking that nobody's going to know. And they had caught on to us. And what we were doing was we were taking those cassettes, and they had, like I said, the big plastic things on them. We'd take them off, and then we'd just leave them in the bathroom, leaving evidence right there. And so we got busted that night, all 3 of us. Unfortunately, it was my younger cousin, the first time he'd ever done it. And my parents, they were gone. So my aunt, both of my aunts ended up coming. It was my younger cousin, mom, and then, of course, my older cousin's mom, who I was staying with. They came to pick us up. They called the cops, And I just remember we going into the back room. They take us to the back. This is 3 just juvenile delinquents, I guess, in the back. tell us to empty all our pockets. We know we're busted. There's no way we're going to. We'd pull out probably $40 worth between all three of us, just money that we had, and then we were still stealing stuff. So I just say that just to say that I'm so thankful that I got busted that night, because we were going down a path that was not going to end well. I would have just kept stealing, honestly, until I would have gotten caught. And so we got caught. Thankfully, for my sake, my parents weren't able to come pick me up. I had to deal with the wrath afterwards, but they had talked about, they'd asked us if they wanted, or the cops had asked both of my aunts if they wanted us to take us to juvenile hall that night. And that scared the living daylights out of us, because we were like, oh man, this is a big deal. And but my aunt, she was like, well, I can't tell him to go. His parents aren't here, so I'm take him home. And so we ended up not having to go to jail that night, but we should have. And but it scared us straight, I think, for the most part. My older cousin ended up getting a little bit more trouble afterwards. Again, I think it's just one of those things. And that whole 8th grade year, I was just a big jerk. I was just trying to get in trouble. It's just being rebellious, I guess. So anyway, I get into my high school years, and now my walk with God is pretty much non-existent. I'm not going to church anymore. My grandparents were never pushy. They wanted me to go to church, and they would always be like, hey, you can come to church with us. And maybe I'd go on a Wednesday night or maybe an occasional Sunday. But since my parents, it wasn't a priority to them, it wasn't really a priority to me anymore. My priority now is kind of hanging out with friends and doing whatever I wanted to. And I remember we would go steal cigarettes, all kinds of different places, and just doing stupid stuff. And so I go into my 8th grade year, still have my best friend. He's not really doing around doing any of that kind of stuff. But I think we got into my freshman year, high school, and we were still going to the same school. And he kind of stuck by my side the whole time. I don't know why. I guess we just had some connections or whatever. But I think it's probably 9th grade year I started to get a little bit straightened out a little bit. Like I'm not getting in much trouble anymore. My grades aren't that great, but I wasn't doing anything that, bad anymore. And then getting into my 10th grade year, I think it was, met a girlfriend and, first real relationship type stuff. And so now my focus is 100% on that, and now I've got my driver's license, and so I can go drive. I've got freedom. I can do whatever I want for the most part. My parents didn't let me do whatever I wanted, but I felt like I had freedom. And so, again, that time, church was not even, God was not even anywhere in the picture whatsoever at this point. So I think it's my 11th grade year, had a bad breakup, some bad things happened with that girlfriend that I'm so thankful that God's a forgiving God, because there was just some bad things that happened. But going to my 11th grade year, my best friend again in high school, he had been going to church, and he invited me to go to church with him. Well, he went to a Church of God church, and I went to a Baptist church. And so we always kind of make fun of each other. You go to Baptist, he's like, yeah, I'll go to Church of God. And I didn't know what Church of God was. I had no clue. Somebody said something about Pentecostal. I was like, I don't know what that is. And so I go to church with him, and he finally gets me to go. And he felt like he had a calling to be a preacher at the time. And so he was, really just kind of focused on that. But, we were still young idiots, I guess, doing stupid stuff, But he invited me to go to church, and so I go to church, and it's like this whole completely different environment from what I grew up in, in the Baptist church, where we sing hymns, and it's very calm, and it's just very structured. It's just like nobody raises their hand, nobody does anything, nobody yells, nothing. You don't interrupt the pastor or anything. And so I go into the Church of God, and it's like people speaking in tongues, and I'm like, this is weird. I don't understand this at all, but it was interesting. I was like, I don't know. There's something about it. It just felt, I guess, sort of real raw, maybe a little bit more so. It didn't feel like you had to be as conservative, I guess, as I felt like I needed to be in the Baptist church that I grew up with. So it had a big impact on me, I felt like, for my journey. And then as I remember, I started getting more involved and going to youth group. We had a really cool youth pastor at the time, and he would take us out, and we would have a lot of fellowship time, and it was really great. And it was like one Monday, I think it was a Monday night, if I remember right. We went to a different church and for like a meeting or something like that. And they, of course, being Pentecostal, they did the laying on hands and things like that, or laying hands on people and stuff like that. And you'd see people falling out in the aisles. And I was like, man, that doesn't make any sense to me. I don't understand that. I didn't understand it at all. But I certainly believed it. And when I heard the pastor, he preached generally the same message that I had heard growing up. And so it still resonated with me. And I was like, there's just something different. Well, we went to that church that one night, and somebody laid their hands on me, and I just fell out. And I still to this day don't understand like what happened. It's not like I just succumbed to anything. I don't know. I just kind of just fell backwards, and there were people there to catch me, and I was out for a little while, and then I came back, and I was like, what happened? And everybody's like, that was cool. But I was like, I thought maybe I was just, I don't know. I still to this day, I don't understand it. And so, but looking back, I just really feel like it was a spiritual moment. I feel like there was something, the Holy Spirit, something that I just could never shake. And so that coupled with that feeling of when I know I was saved on those steps back when I was 11 years old, it was just some sort of peace that I've never, again, those are the two moments in my life where I've just felt like I was in the presence of something else. And so both of those two moments are very, very big in my mind that I'll never be able to shake and never be able to forget. And I think that's sort of what kept me or never let me get too far away from God, was those two moments. So going into, finishing up high school, best friend, he ends up going to another high school, and I finish up. And at this point, I had taken aircraft maintenance my last 2 years of high school, and I'd really gotten into airplanes and thought aviation was a really cool career field. And I was like, I really want to be a pilot. I don't know exactly where that came from. I guess, again, just maybe taking aircraft maintenance. I was originally going to go take metal fabrication, but it was going to be the first year of my 11th grade year that they were going to offer aircraft maintenance. And I was like, that sounds way cooler. I get to work on airplanes. So I did that my junior and senior year, and it was a lot of fun. And it just kind of sparked something in me. I was like, I like airplanes. Well, my dad, when I graduated high school, he was like, well, you can get your pilot's license. And so he let me go get my pilot's license when I graduated high school. So I got my pilot's license. It took about a year. Shouldn't have taken that long. Whole nother story. But in any case, in 2000, I ended up finally getting my pilot's license. I met my, who is my wife now, Rachel. She was just 15, I think, when I met her. I had just graduated high school, so I think I just turned 18. And that would have been in like just before 2000. So it was like December of 99, I think, when I met her. I graduated in the summer of 1999. And so I met her, we started dating, and we're still together, so it worked out. But, so at that point, again, God wasn't really much in the story much, but now I've sort of got this dream of like, I want to be a pilot and stuff like that. And so I tried to go to college, and that wasn't the thing. Well, I think it would have been in later on, it would have been 2001. Yeah. In 2001, Rachel gets pregnant. So we're getting ready to have our first son. And, again, I'm probably I'd have been 19, I think, 19 then. Rachel was 17 when she had Caleb. And, we're trying to figure out, and I'm just, again, I'm thinking back as I think of how young my parents were, of like, I don't know how they did as good as they did, but I didn't do it nearly as good as they did first. I was not very, I wasn't ready to be a dad by any means. And, but, as soon as we had our son, everything changed. I was like, wow, this is something different. And so later on that year, Rachel and I, we both were believers, but church wasn't a priority. I went to church with her a few times. Her parents went to church, and so again, but I didn't care. I was more preoccupied with other things, and so we were just out having a good time partying, and now she ends up pregnant, and so we're having a kid, and now she's got to grow up because she has no choice, and I'm still wanting to go have a good time, and so I wasn't a very good person at the time, but I did want to support my family. And so I'm trying to figure this out. I'm like, I want to be a pilot. I want to go to college, but I can't afford it. So what am I going to do? So it was my birthday of 2022, I think. Would that have been right? Yeah. no, 23. I think it was, yeah. May of 2023. Now Caleb, he's just been born back in September of 2022, so he's maybe 4 or 5 months old.
You mean 2002?
2002, sorry, yeah, 2002. Okay. So he was born in 2002, so now we're in May of 2003, and I'm like trying to figure out like how I'm going to take care of my family. And I'm just working jobs here and there, just scraping by as best as I can. And me and Rachel's relationship's not that great anymore. And so it's my birthday of 2003. In April, we had an air show coming to town. And I don't think there ever has been one before. I don't remember one growing up. And I don't think there's ever been one since. But the U.S. Air Force Thunderbirds were coming to town. And it was just like this one day. It was a Saturday. It was my birthday. And I think Rachel got tickets or something. We ended up going to their show that day. And I told her, I was like, man, I think I just want to go to the military. You know, it wasn't really what I wanted to do, but it was the only path I could see to like take care of my family and be able to go to college. And, you know, I'm 20 or 21 at this point, and I have no future, really. I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to support my family. So Rachel's like, no, you're not joining the military because I'm not going with you if you do. And so I'm like, well, I'm not leaving. I'm not going to leave my son. And I didn't want to leave her either, but we go to this air show and we see the U.S. Air Force Thunderbirds that day. And I don't know what happened. You know, I like to say this is a recruiting video for the Air Force because it works, but we went and saw the Thunderbirds and she's like, okay, you can join the Air Force. And I called the recruiter on Monday. And went, I think this would have been, it was April 26th of 2003. We got married a month later, May 27th of 2003. We had been engaged for a little bit, but I went to the recruiter, and the recruiter's like, you can't join the military because you have a son and you're not married. I don't know the rules behind it, I still don't to this day, but he said I can't join the military unless we got married or I signed over rights to him. And I was like, well, I'm not going to sign over my rights to him. I'm not going to do that because this just didn't feel right to me. But again, we were engaged. He's like, well, why don't you guys get married? And we looked at each other and we were like, yeah, well, okay, I guess why not? You know? So we got married a month later. And then we ended up we thought I was going to leave and go in the military really, really quick. We're like, I'm going to get married and then we're going to leave and I'm going to go to basic training. And so we planned, we just kind of got a wedding real quick. We found a minister who would do it for us and then would legally marry us, but then do our ceremony a couple weeks later because we thought, you know, we didn't have time to put a ceremony together. And I really wanted to get married in the church, and so did Rachel. But legally, I had to have the paperwork to take to the Air Force and say I could go ahead and go enlist. So May 27th, we got married. I went to enlist the very next day, I think, if I remember right. And then it come to find out I didn't get to go for 9 months after that. So I had to wait another 9 months. So February 2004 is when I joined the military and left. And so now married with our youngest son, who's not quite young, or did he turn? Yeah, he just turned 1. Or no, not quite young, not quite 1 yet. And I leave to go to the military. And it would have been May of 2004. Rachel, I was down in Mississippi for tech school. I was learning to be an air traffic controller in the Air Force. And so graduated basic training, gone off to Mississippi for training to learn to be an air traffic controller. And I had to call her. That was the day I found out where we were going to go. That's where we're going to get stationed at, where we're going to get based at. And I remember telling the recruiter, I said, I don't care where in the world I get to go as long as it's not North Dakota. And I got Grand Forks, North Dakota was my first base. And so I don't think it was meant to be that way, but I don't know. In the end, God was in it, 100%. I wholeheartedly believe that we went there for us, for Rachel and I. I had to call her on our anniversary, 1 year anniversary in May 2004, May 27th, and tell her that we're going to Grand Forks, North Dakota, and she cried. So I made her cry on our first anniversary, which was terrible. But like I said, in the end, we ended up going up there. She was young, and she didn't want to leave home. She didn't want to leave her mom, and I don't blame her. But it was the best thing that ever could have happened to us, because when we were young and trying to figure out marriage and life as a married couple, being away from family and not being able to run back to mom and dad, and same thing for me, not being able to go back to mom and dad, was the best thing that could ever happen for our marriage, because we had to turn to each other when we didn't want to. You know, we didn't want to we would fight and we just couldn't run away. We'd have to go in another room and then, make up. And so in the end, we ended up growing so much out of that, being gone to North Dakota. So I know looking back that God did that for a reason. It wasn't just because I said I didn't want to go there. I just think it's funny. But North Dakota there for 4.5 years. And everything's going pretty good. But again, I just remember being there and we weren't going to church. We were just partying, having a good time, living the military lifestyle. And I would call my grandparents, and my grandmother would be like, "Hey, you find a church?" And I'm like, "Yeah, Grandma, sure. I'll see if I can find a church." And we never did. There was not anything. It wasn't even in the front of our head at all. And I get deployed to Iraq in 2007. And come back, and what happens when you come back from a deployment? Well, 9 times out of 10, you have another baby, and that's what happens. So we ended up having Elijah in 2008. And at this point, now I got 2 kids, and I'm like, well, I was thinking about getting out of the military, but then I was like, we're going to have 2 kids. I can't. So I ended up re-enlisted, and I knew if I re-enlisted, I was going to stay for the whole 20 years. So we're in North Dakota. We get orders to go to Georgia. I go down to Georgia. We go to Warner Robins, Georgia in 2009. And we end up having, it's actually, we decided we were going to buy a house. And the day before we closed on it, it would have been Sunday, Rachel takes a pregnancy test, and we find out we're having number 3. And we're just getting ready to close the very next day on a 3-bedroom house. And we're like, this is interesting. So take it back just a little bit. When we had Caleb, we had him younger. Well, there was, 5 or 6 years before we had Elijah. And Rachel had some ovarian cysts. She had to have one of her ovaries removed. And so we didn't think she was going to be able to have any more kids. Well, then we had 2 back-to-back, 15 months apart. So she was fixed. So now we just bought a house, and we got 3 kids. So we got 3 kids now. But again, church wasn't much of a focus, at all. And so I ended up getting orders to go to Korea for a year in 2000. What I left in 2011 or 12, I think it was. So we go to Warner Robins, Georgia, thinking that we had been in North Dakota for 4.5 years. I go to Georgia, and I'm like, I'm going to be here for a while. I'd only been there for just under 2 years, and I got the assignment to go to Korea. And Korea was unaccompanied, meaning you couldn't take your family with you. And so that was kind of scary. It's like 12 months without being with your family. I had done a deployment to Iraq, just once, and there's a couple little times here and there where I had to leave my family. But this was the real deal, where I was going to be gone for a long period of time. And you can come back halfway through for just 1 month, but outside of that, you're gone. And it was the worst year of my entire life. I look back on it, and I did a lot of stupid things that I think it was just kind of coping with being gone, maybe, I don't know. The culture there is just drink. Everybody there, nobody's family's there. There's no kids. Nobody has responsibilities of family. So you just drink. And when I first got there, I didn't drink much, here and there, but it wasn't anything crazy. Well, I come back home on mid-tour of that summer of 2012 or 2013. And we have a good time, but it was tough because I come back knowing I got to leave to go back to Korea again. And so I'm sort of in this mindset of like, I don't want to get back connected to the family because I know I'm just going to have to leave again. And so I probably wasn't just there because I knew I was going to have to leave again. And maybe that was my defense mechanism. I'm not sure. I'm just trying to deal with it. So we have a good time. We go on vacation, all that stuff. But then I leave to go back to Korea, and I'm just in this massive state of depression. Like, I just want to be with my family. I'm like, I can't believe I'm having to leave again. I'm going to be gone for another 4 or 5 months. And it just was hard. And so I go back, and somebody knocks on the door. You want to go drinking? I'm like, yeah, why not? And they just started this path of just drinking way, way, way too much, and just that became my priority. Well, my grandfather ended up passing away while I'm there. And of course, what I'm going to do is go drink some more. And it really, really strained mine and Rachel's relationship to the point where I don't know how we're still married today. She's amazing that she stayed with me. But somehow I make it through Korea. come back, and now we're going to end up moving to South Carolina, which is closer to home. So that seems like it's going to be good, and so, but we're still just on really shaky ground in our marriage, trying to recover from that year. And in that time, Rachel also had a miscarriage right after I'd come back, or gone back to Korea. She had a miscarriage, and she was trying to deal with that. And I still kind of struggle with this a lot, where when she told me she was pregnant, I didn't want to have another kid. And so, if I'm being honest, I was sort of relieved when she had the miscarriage, and I still struggle with that. I don't know that's how I was supposed to feel, and I think she sensed that as well, and that added even more stress to our marriage. And so it's just hard, just kind of dealing with that stuff. Well, we get to South Carolina, everything starts to smooth out, like we kind of working everything out, and I started to feel like I needed to go to church. And I think Rachel we kind of had it at the same time. We just started feeling this pull, like we need something else. There was just something missing from our life and from our marriage, and just in general, like we didn't need for anything. We didn't really, of course you always want for stuff. We didn't really need for anything, but there was just something missing. And so I think, again, about the same time, we were like, we just need to go to church. So we started to go to church a little bit. This has been the first time we really start going to church. And like I said, my grandfather had just passed away. Well, I think it was that next year that I'd just gotten back when my grandmother passed away. And those were the two grandparents that I grew up with who had been very influential in me going to church and stuff like that. And so maybe that was part of it. I don't know. But we did start going to church, but my excuse was always like, we're going to leave again. I'm in the military. I didn't want to get too connected or involved in a church. It was sort of my excuse, it's like, I don't want to get involved because I know I'm just going to leave again. So we'd go on Easter, we'd go, maybe for a month or something, and we'd stop, and, so it was not a priority by any means. Still drinking a little bit here and there, not as much, because I thought I about killed myself when I was in Korea. I was like, I don't need to do that anymore. I didn't want to, bring any more stress into our family that I didn't need to. But in any case, we go through there, and then I ended up getting an assignment to go to Africa for a year. We ended up actually, we'll take it back just a little bit before that, we ended up having another son. We had Noah, our youngest now, who's 9, getting ready to turn 10. But I ended up getting an assignment to go to Greenland. I'm sorry, not Greenland, but Africa. And so I go to Africa, and Noah's only like 5 months old when I leave. And so that was tough on Rachel. She's got 4 boys she's trying to take care of. And then I'm going to Africa for like 5 months, I think. And I couldn't tell her where I was going. She didn't know. It was a secret assignment. And I was like, I'm just going. I can't tell you anything. Sorry. And that was stressful. And so she knew I was going somewhere that probably wasn't good. So she's dealing with that. She's dealing with the kids. And it was just hard again, but in that time, I think we were sort of getting better. We were growing, and, we'd had our youngest kid, who we did not expect to have. We didn't think we were going to have any more kids by any means, because I think he's 9, and then Gabriel's 15. So 5-6 years between kids again. And so we didn't think we were going to have any more. So he was a little miracle, I guess. And again, I go back and, I think of like that time in Korea where I was sort of glad that we didn't have a kid. And when we were getting ready to have Noah, I was very nervous about having a kid. I was like, I don't know how we're going to afford it. Being a guy, I'm thinking, I say logically, but I don't think it's really logical. But I'm thinking of, like, how am I going to support the kid and stuff like that. And so we have Noah, and he's just been the best blessing to us. He was the kid we didn't even know we needed, and he's just been awesome for us. And so that was one of God's many blessings. All of our kids are blessings for sure, but that one was just out of the blue. We weren't expecting it, and we thought for sure we were done. And so we ended up having him. Well, you get there when we're in South Carolina, and I go on that deployment to Africa. I come back, and I've now got an assignment to come up here to Virginia. And so we ended up moving up to Virginia in 2017, and it was about that time my oldest son says, I don't believe in God. And that was like a kick to the face, chest, everything. I mean, just like, I just felt like a complete and total failure as a parent. And he still has that same stance, but it changed me. It really did. It was like, well, there's a reason why he doesn't believe in God. Maybe I failed as a parent, but also I haven't been living the life I should be. And so I really think when I look back, God used that moment to really shift our thought process and my thought process. So I move up to Virginia and I figure out a way to where I can start flying again. I'm like, oh, I'm starting to see a path where I can make flying a career. I joined the Air Force. I wanted to fly, but I knew I couldn't because I wasn't an officer. I didn't have a college degree. And so I picked air traffic control, which is the closest thing I think of. And so that's why I did that. Well, I had been getting my degree through the military. And so I'd finally got my bachelor's degree, but I didn't see a path toward being able to fly. I figured out a way using my GI Bill to start being able to fly. And so I started flying. This is in 2017, I think, or 18. I start flying and start working towards that goal. And I'm like, wow, this is really cool. Maybe this really is what God's got planned for me, is to go do this. So we're still thinking about church. We're not going again. It's not a priority by any means. And so the priority now is I want to fly. I've seen that path and I'm driven. I'm like, I just want to go do that. And so I start flying a lot and go through and get all my license and become a flight instructor. And worked my butt off. It was hard. It was one of the hardest things I ever done to become a flight instructor. And so, but now I'm like, this is sort of, my dreams are being realized a little bit. Like I'm a professional pilot, if you will. I'm getting paid to fly. And so I'm working, as a part-time flight instructor. I just finished up, I'd finished my degree. I'm a part-time flight instructor, full-time Air Force. And so I'm gone a lot, just flying, trying to build up hours to thinking like when I retire, that's what I want to do. I want to be an airline pilot. Well, I'm flying for like a year as a flight instructor, and I get another assignment to go to Greenland for a year. And so I think me and Rachel both were freaking out a little bit. It's another remote assignment. This was one I volunteered for. I didn't volunteer to go to Korea, but I volunteered for this one. And I did it because I knew I kind of wanted to take things into my own hands. I applied to go because I knew that if I didn't, they might send me back to Korea. And I knew that if I went back to Korea, it was not going to be good. So I asked to go to Greenland. Well, I found out I was going to get to come back to Virginia after this year in Greenland. So at that point, I'm like, well, there's not really, and I knew at the end of that I was going to pretty much be right at retirement. And so we're like, well, let's see if we can buy a house, because we know we're going to need to come back here. So we start looking at buying a house. This was in late 2019. And I was supposed to leave to go to Greenland in April of 2020. And so we kind of hit up and we're renting a house, and we're like starting to look for houses and things like that. And so at this point, I'm like, well, that excuse for not going to church is not there anymore, because we know I'm coming back here. And I can't use the excuse of, well, I know I'm probably just going to move and I can't get connected. And so that excuse is kind of out the window. And I look back and I think that was God again. That's why he did what he did, because now he knew he could remove that excuse from me going back to church and getting involved in a church. And so I look at it and I'm like, well, we start looking for a house. And I think it was that Christmas of 2019, we got a flyer in the mail from Liberty Life Church. And it was like the Christmas service. And I'm like, well, that's an opportunity. We got to go. I'd been wanting to go to a Christmas service. And so we go and we really like it. And we're like, I think this is going to be our church home. So we kind of go sporadically a little bit. I know I'm getting ready to go to Greenland, and kind of getting ready for that, the holidays and things like that. And we're looking for a house, and so we find a house. I think in February we put an offer on it, falls through, and about this time, this little thing called COVID starting to hear some stuff about this. And we're like, what is this? Sounds like flu or something. No big deal. Don't think anything of it. Well, we find this other house that just kind of pops up, and we're like, yeah, we're going to see if we can get that house. And we go through and put an offer in, everything gets approved. And this was in, again, I think February, March of 2020. Everything's starting to close down, just getting ready to shut down for COVID. And we didn't know what was going on. I don't think anybody did. And we thought we were going to lose the house. There was some stuff that needed to get done, like I needed to get a roof put on it, is what it was. And we had used all of our money basically to try to get this house. We had worked with the sellers to try to get some things fixed. They had done a lot, and in the end, they were like, we can't do any more. And so basically they're like, the VA comes in, we're getting a VA loan, and they say, you got to put a roof on the house before we would give you a loan. And we're like, man, we just lost the house. There's no way we're going to get this house. I can't afford to get it. There's no way. Only thing I knew to do was pray. And at that point, I just got to the point where I was like, God, if this is your will, please let us get this house, And it's the first time I ever really remember God I know beyond a shadow of doubt, he answered the prayer. Like, I really just was at a point where I didn't know where else to turn, is turn to God. And it may seem silly, but to me it was a big deal, because we'd spent a lot of money. I'm getting ready to go to Greenland for a year and kind of like stressing out. Now the COVID stuff's happening. I'm like, what is going on? And we're like at the finish line of buying this house, and it's about to fall through. And I just prayed, and we wrote a letter to the sellers, and I said, this is all the money I got. I got enough money to pay for half the roof if you'll cover the other half. And they agreed to it. And God answered our prayer, and we got our house. And then I left, and I was supposed to leave in April, ended up leaving in May. Everything got delayed about a month, and ended up going to Greenland for a year. And I told myself before I went, I was like, I will not drink. I shall not drink when I go to Greenland. Or at least, I had not like said I'm never going to drink again, but I was like, I'm not going to do it like I did last time. And so I get to Greenland, and I remember taking my Bible with me. I don't really know why I did. I think maybe just I felt like I needed to take it. I was going to be gone for a year. I took my Bible with me. And we go in and get there, and like I said, COVID had happened, and so when we got there, we had to quarantine for 2 weeks. And so basically we go in, you quarantine for 2 weeks, and you're stuck in your room. And so I get there, and I'm just in my room for 2 weeks. I got nothing to do, So hanging out, pondering life and stuff like that, and start flipping through the Bible a little bit here and there. Not much, but I'm just in the back of my head, it's like, I just felt like God was doing something. So finally get out of quarantine, and we go, and we have this thing called, I called it Arctic Start, but it's kind of like a right start briefing. So all the newcomers come in, and they come into a room, and the base commanders, everybody comes in, introduces themselves and stuff like that. And they would go around the room, and we all knew going to Greenland that you would have a lot of downtime. The mission was not super, super busy. It was very, very remote. I mean, we're so far north that you couldn't even see the northern lights, because the northern lights would be south of you. That's how far north you are.
Wow.
So when I worked in the control tower, we would look to I think it would have been to our east, and that was the polar ice cap. So we were kind of almost above the polar ice cap to some degree. It's crazy, but it was really cool. But so we had a lot of downtime while we're there, and so they would go around and be like, what are you going to do with this year? And in my head, I brought my guitar with me. I'm like, I'm going to play the guitar, maybe read a book or something. I hadn't really figured out exactly what I was going to do, but they go around the room, and this one guy stands up, and he says, I want to read the Bible in the whole year, this year. I want to read the whole Bible. And I was like, that's what I'm going to do. That's exactly what I'm going to do. I brought my Bible, I had it, and I ended up doing it 3 months, and I probably read it twice the whole time I was there. But it wasn't long after that I found out I didn't get promoted again, and I was just devastated. I was like, how can this be happening again? I'd been trying to get promoted, and it just wasn't working out. And so I think it was, again, trying to get closer to God. I started watching some sermons and stuff on YouTube and stuff like that. And also I wanted to make sure I watched the sermon back here at church, back here in Virginia, so I could sort of stay connected to the local church as best as I could. And I had watched a sermon by Greg Groeschel. It was called A Purpose in Your Pain. And it was right after I'd found out I didn't get promoted. And I was just like, God, how can this be happening? I was mad, lack of a better term. I was just mad, almost mad at God to some degree. I was like, this doesn't make any sense. I don't understand it. And at that point, 9 times out of 10, in the past, I probably would have went and drank or just kind of cut it off or whatever. But for some reason, I just opened my Bible, and I was like, I'm gonna study the Bible a little bit. I watched that sermon, and again, it was Purpose in Your Pain, and I still have the notes of everything I went through there. And it was just a moment where I was like, God's telling me something. It's like, there's a purpose, there's a reason behind this. And so like a couple weeks later, I was like, I want to go to the chapel and get involved in the church, or the chapel. It's not really a church on base. It's like super, super small. Not much bigger than this house. This first floor of your house here was our chapel. It was tiny, but I'd gone and I'd heard that the chaplain who was there was getting ready to leave. Well, now I had that excuse not to go again. Well, I don't want to go because, they're getting ready to leave or whatever. So I think it was Memorial Day. I think they were having a celebration on base, and I go to this thing, and this guy gets out of the truck, and I'm wearing a Clemson hoodie. And he was like, "Oh, Clemson, huh?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And so he kind of struck up a conversation. Turns out he went to, he had grown up or not grown up, he'd gone to college in my hometown of Greenville, South Carolina. He had gone to Bob Jones University. And so we kind of had the connection, and he was like, "I'm the chaplain." And I was like, okay, so he ends up sitting down next to me at dinner, and we chit chat back and forth, and I was like, what time service on Sunday? And he was like 11 o'clock or something like that. So I ended up going and getting involved, and it was around that time I was like, what am I going to do with this year? Of course I want to read the Bible, but I was like, I really want to get into so I want to figure some more God stuff out. And so I was like, well, I'll take some theology courses or something online. And I was like, well, why don't I get some college credit for it if I'm going to do it? So I hit up Liberty University. I had been going through them through the aviation program, and I was like, I already have a bachelor's degree. Can I just work on a master's of divinity? And I was like, there's no way they're gonna think I'm an idiot. I'd never taken a Bible college class ever. I knew very little about the Bible at all. No way they're gonna accept me to a master's degree program. It made no sense. I don't even know why I did it. So I called them up. I was like, hey, I want to take some master's classes in theology. And they're like, well, you got to apply. I'm like, okay, whatever. I was like, this, no way. I was accepted in like 3 days. It made no sense to me. And I was like, well, okay, maybe God's pointing me somewhere. I don't know. And it was funny because I had to get a pastoral recommendation to be able to even be able to accept it to it. And I was like, I was not super involved in the church back here, didn't know really the pastors at all, and so I didn't feel like it would be appropriate for me to ask them. And I don't know why I felt like it was appropriate to ask the chaplain on base, but I was like, hey, can I have a pastoral recommendation? He was like, yeah, sure. And so I was like, okay. So again, it might have been like a week that I had applied and got accepted, but since I was already, had been in the system and taken classes recently, I think that made it move faster. I think if they would have known the whole story, they might not have accepted it. But in the end, I ended up taking, I think, like 20 credit hours throughout that year towards my Master's of Divinity. And in that year, that chaplain really just poured into me, and there was a couple of us who maybe felt like we had a call to ministry. And it was the most transformative year of my life. I mean, I just really felt like God was working in me. I had a lot of time just to focus on Him. And in the end, it was the hardest thing to leave those guys, because it was just, we had gotten really tight. We'd have Bible study on Tuesday nights. And just throughout that year, again, the contrast between that and the year in Korea was this was the year where God pulled me to Him. And Rachel and I really grew together. It was odd that in that year in Korea, how we had grown apart and just how alcohol had kind of pulled us apart. But in a year of being gone, putting God in it had grown us back together. We'd actually gotten closer in that year, I think, because we had God in the middle of it all. We'd even do some Bible studies over FaceTime or whatever video thing was at the time. I can't remember. And so it was just a great time of the year. And I come back home on mid-tour this time, and it's around Christmas time, and we go to church service, and I think my kids and my wife, they were kind of like, who is this guy? This is a really weird guy. We don't not like him, but it's just different. And it had been, that 5 or 6 months or whatever of just spending time with God where it just changed me. And so I think it was hard for them a little bit to get that, but I was just focused. I was like, this is it. This is the most important thing that there is. And so really, I'm getting ready to go back to finish up my time in Greenland, and we have 21 days of prayer in January. It would have been January of 21, I think. And I had never done a 21 days of prayer ever. And so I told Rachel, I was like, I really want to do this. Will you do it with me? And she was like, yeah. And so we did, and it was the greatest thing they ever did. I only got to do 2 weeks, but when I went back, I watched every single day, and she kept going for that last week, even though we weren't able to go together. And it was just one of the best things that had ever happened. And from that point on, we've just been solely focused. I came back from Greenland and got accepted to the school ministry at Liberty and just really got involved in the church. And still my kids don't like maybe the new me. They like the good parts of it, but the kind of being focused on church is just hard for them maybe to grasp, but it's just how God worked in my life. And so that's kind of the testimony in a nutshell of how God just always kind of was there. He was always there in those moments. And as I look back, I didn't realize it. I look back at all those little moments of where I knew I wasn't connected to God, but he was always there. And how everything was just, a lot of people might say it's just chance or happenstance that all these things happened and the way it worked out. And I just know there's no way that things could work out the way they did if God wasn't in it. And so I just see that in all those little moments. And there's many more of just where God was always there, waiting on me to get to the right time. If I'd have done it earlier, maybe I wouldn't have stuck with it, but he found me right when I needed to be found and kept me around long enough, thank him, that he did keep me around long enough to get to that point where it's just been the greatest thing that's ever happened, is just getting closer to him. And it's a daily struggle, and it gets harder every single day. I think every day is a little bit harder than the last to some degree, but it's a good kind of hard, it's just different. And I go back and think of like one of the things, I meant to mention this a second ago, like just before I went to Greenland, like I said, I was flight instructing and I had everything before me, and I was like, I just remember, like, I thought I had everything, like I'm working towards my dream, I've got an awesome family. I've got 4 beautiful kids, an awesome wife, we've got our house, or we're getting ready to have a house, all these things. And I just felt so empty. It was like, I remember telling Rachel, I was like, I should have everything, but I'm working really hard. And I was like, well, maybe I'm just working too hard. Maybe that's what it is. But again, I go back and look, I know it's just, I was missing God. That was the one thing that was really missing. So when I come back, I start back flight instructing, and I'm doing the school of ministry and being involved in the church and stuff like that. And, eventually I did realize my dream at the end of retiring last year. I realized my dream of going to the airlines. But I remember like getting done with training with the airlines, and I'm like, that's it. This is it. I worked so hard for all this, really, really hard. And I had God in my life at this point, but like, it just still felt like it's not right. Something's wrong. Something's not right here. I'm working for an airline, getting ready to go be an actual first officer for an airline. And I did, and I go through training, and I'm out there, and I'm like, this is just wrong. This doesn't feel right. Something's not right. I'm like, it doesn't make any sense. I'm still trying to make sense of it, But I know God's working, and so thankfully through all those trials and things like that, I can look back and see that God was in it in every moment. And even though I'm struggling right now trying to figure out like what the next step is for me, even though like I'm thankful that I figured out pretty early on that the airlines was not the job for me. Being gone from family and stuff like that was not what I wanted to do. Did it for 6 months, and I was like, that's not it. This is not right. It's not where God wants me right now. And I'm thankful I'm sensitive to that, instead of waiting 5 years to figure that out, or whatever the case may be. I figured it out pretty quick. And so, but I realized my dream, and so I think that was kind of it. I think as I look back, I was telling somebody the other day, I was like, I don't understand why God would provide me the opportunity to do all these things. And because I really look back and I'm like, he gave me the opportunity to go fly. He gave me the opportunity to realize my dream. But I think, as I really look at it, I think God allowed me to realize my dream to show me that it wasn't my dream. It wasn't about me. It's about him. And it's about what he wants. And so when I realized my dream, he was like, okay, you did it. You're welcome. I answered your prayer. But now on to the next thing, And so we'll see what he's got. But yeah, that's kind of it in a nutshell.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So let me ask then, because some of the things that this was interesting hearing the second time.
Yeah,
and it's
probably added a couple extra things.
You did.
Yeah.
You actually went into some more detail on some stuff, which was cool. But let me ask, like, what sharing your story has done for you.
Yeah.
Like going through this whole process and just being able to, I guess, think back and reflect. And you kind of talked about that, God was there through all these different points in time in your life. So yeah, how's that? How's it been sharing your testimony?
Oh, it's been great. It's actually really awesome, and I really appreciate you asking me to do it because I probably wouldn't have done it otherwise. Just to go back and like you said, to go back and see God in those moments. I knew He was there, but to get into more detail, maybe to bring up some things I just don't think about anymore. I go back and I went back and hopefully I didn't bore too many people with it, but I went back as far as I could because. It is my story, but I knew God was there from the beginning as well, and it was all just steps. I don't have like that one moment. I don't think in my life where it was like, there's God. I really look back and I'm like, He was always there, and it was just, I wouldn't say He was waiting on me or anything like that, but it was just His timing was perfect, right? And so. I just look back and I think of all those moments, and it's been really great to go back and really just kind of. There's been some bad things that are maybe not fun to think about again, but also I look at it in the light of like, well, I'm glad I went through that because God was there even in those bad moments, But then I see all the good moments too of like God was there, and it's just been fun just to go back and kind of to relive it a little bit, just write it all out, and I kind of want to. Do it again sometime, maybe in a few years, because there's still a lot more to be written. I hope anyway. God keeps me here a little bit longer. There's more to be written to this testimony. I hope, but
yeah. Well, I think too, as part of the Christian life is, we're never supposed to just stay stagnant. Yeah. So as long as we're moving and taking chances and taking risks, like there's always going to be opportunities for, the Lord to do certain things in our life and more. To be written for sure.
Yep, for sure. Yep. Yeah, it's been good. I've enjoyed it. It's cool. I hope that more people will do it. I think it's great what you're doing. Just to try to, again, it's easy to share your story because it's yours.
Yeah. Everybody's got one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I'm curious too to kind of talk about church. Mm-hmm. So I guess just thinking over your whole story, you mentioned a lot about going to church and feeling like you need to go to church, and I read something on X just the other day, and someone asked the question, "Can you still be a Christian and not go to church?" And so I'm curious what your response is to that.
I love that question because my mom has asked me that a lot, and it's been hard. I don't know that I've articulated it in a way that's well. I want to say that, I'm the kind of person who wants to fix stuff. And so I want to fix my mom, but she's not broken by any means, but like I want her to go to church more. She calls me up one night. She's like, am I not a Christian if I don't go to church? She's like, I just feel like I can worship Him in my home. And I'm like, Mom, I get it. You don't need to go to church to be a Christian. But to use Pastor Grant's quote that I've heard him say is like, you don't have to go home to be married either. And but if you don't go home, your relationship's going to suffer. And that's the best way I know how to explain it. I really do. You don't have to go to church to be saved. You don't have to go to church to be a Christian by any means. But if you read the Bible and you have a relationship with Him, why wouldn't you want to? And so that's the best way I know how to explain it. I know there's a lot of Sundays I don't want to go to church. I don't want to go people a lot of times. But I know that's what God's called me to do. And I've gotten to the point now where like I know I can never repay God for what He's done for me. There's no way. He saved me, from eternal death. But that doesn't mean I don't want to try. I don't want to try to serve Him. It's like that's all I want to do is try to serve Him because again, works don't save me, but it's because of what He's done. It makes me want to work for Him and for His kingdom. And so that's what I would tell anybody who thinks they don't need to go to church. No, you don't. But if you have a relationship with Him, I think you'll probably want to.
Yeah, that's a good. I haven't heard him say that. Yeah. So that was a good way of putting it. Is the what my response was? Why wouldn't you want to? And then someone else commented, well, my church is a community and da 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 da. And I'm just thinking, but you kind of missed it. You missed it a little bit. Yeah. I think there's just such a fullness of the people in the church because it's more than just the four walls and the roof.
It's not the building.
It's so much more than
the building's not important.
Yeah,
some of them are beautiful and that's great, but it's not about the building at all. It's about the people inside of it. And I think something that helped me a lot too was, I think you get the stigma with church, like you need to clean up to go to church. And I know I certainly have felt that way. And I think that's maybe, I don't want to speak from a mom. Maybe that's part of it. Maybe growing up in a conservative Baptist church, you feel like you got to put on your Sunday's best. And that's just what I was raised. You put on your best clothes and you go to church because that's what God wants you to do. Well, God just wants you to go. I think he just wants you to have a relationship with him. He doesn't, I think for the longest time I thought church was going to somewhere with a lot of saints, and it's not. It's a lot of sinners. It's all sinners, and it's a hospital. So when I start to think of it that way, it really changed how I thought about church. It's like it's a hospital for sick people, and we're all sick and we all have sin, and so that's the only place we can go and really try to get some help with that sickness. And so I don't know if that helps, but I certainly it's all about the relationship. It's not about saying I'm a Christian. It's not about saying, I believe in God. It's about having a relationship with God. That's what he really wants. That's what after reading the Bible and hearing many, many sermons and trying to work out it all in my head as well. It just really comes down to it. Like, he just wants to have a relationship with you. And if you want to have a relationship with him, that's probably what he wants you to do, is go to his house and have a relationship with him, So
yeah. And you, you've been pretty involved with the church too. I remember you said you went to the School of Ministry, and you kind of jumped all in, which I think, in our church, because it's a bigger church, you have to do certain things like that in order to meet people, in order to really feel a part.
Yeah. I tell everybody, I love to, when we do Life Track at our church, I think every quarter, and I'm so blessed to be able to get to do that ministry, because you get to sit down with people that are new to the church, and they're trying to figure out, like, why do I want to join this church? And that's kind of the pathway to join the church. But really, I think it's more, I love the way the church here sets it up. It's like next steps. Okay, you got saved. Cool. Now what? Because I go back and look at myself as that little 11-year-old kid. I got saved, but then nobody told me, now what? I didn't know what I was supposed to do. Okay, you'll get baptized. I did that. Okay, now what? And nobody told me that. And for many, many years, I had to figure it out on my own. And so I think that when you have something like that, you have the Life Track, and you sit there and you go, okay, you sit down and you tell them, like, hey, this is a big church, and we're talking about having next steps. Yeah, it's a big church, but we want you to get connected. We don't want it to feel like so big. And I tell everybody, like, I went to that church because it was a big church, because I wanted to sort of get lost. All I wanted to do was go to church on Sunday and feel like I checked the mark, and that's that. Okay, I'm a good Christian this week, And but I learned pretty quick, like, that's not having a relationship. That's just checking a box. That's doing works. I feel like I'm working towards my salvation. I'm doing something that way. I'm not having that relationship. I'm not after God's heart, and he's not a part of my heart, something. So I felt like something else was missing. So I tell everybody, like, yeah, it's a big church, but it's really easy to get lost, but we try to do everything that we can to get people to connect into the smaller groups so that it doesn't feel so big, because, again, it's not just church, it's life, but it's a real thing. It's not just church. It's about doing life together with other believers and working it all out. Again, we're all sinners. We're all broken. We can't figure it all out on our own. So I can guarantee you that something that you're going through, somebody either has been or is or will be going through the same thing. And so you can have that connection in those smaller groups to try to have that bond and that fellowship. And I mean, when you read the Bible, you don't see anybody doing life by themselves. You know, they're all in fellowship, so I think that's really the way it was designed. We're not, as human beings, meant to be alone. Because it's a miserable existence if you are. So, a year in Greenland will teach you that.
Well, and I've thought about it too, as, just like when you're growing up in your family, you learn certain skills and stuff like that are developed, within your own family. Same thing in the church. You learn different skills and different spiritual gifts, stuff like that. That's where all of that is developed.
Absolutely.
So
it's that whole body, the body of Christ, right? It's not. And, hand don't work without the arm.
Yeah, exactly.
And the arm don't work without, all the parts got to work together for it to do it. And that, everybody has their own spiritual, special spiritual gifts. And when it all comes together, it's something. It's a little bit of heaven here on earth, I think, when it really works the way God intended it to. Mm-hmm. So yeah.
Do you think if you had more direction, like earlier in your life, because I guess when you said that, I immediately thought of mentor, like more of a mentor type person.
Yeah.
Do you think if you had that earlier in your life, that things would have gone a little bit different, or maybe you would have stayed more connected in a church?
That's a hard question to answer, because in the end, I feel like, yes, 100% I do agree. I do think that. And I wish I would have had mentors earlier. But it's like anything, like hindsight 2020, you look back and you're like, man, I could have gotten here a lot sooner if only.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't have had the journey if I'd had of, and I maybe wouldn't have learned some things along the way. So yes and no. Like, again, I do wish I had mentorship earlier, and maybe I wouldn't have had a rocky road, or as rocky of a road, but I'm thankful for that rocky road, because it's gotten me to where I am, and I've learned a lot of things along that. Failure is an amazing teacher.
Yeah.
And so, I think that's something that needs to be, I won't say preached, but taught more, is like, it's okay to mess up. It's okay to fail.
Yeah.
Because when you try to be perfect, it's unattainable. And I know for me, I'm a perfectionist and I hate to fail. And I have a hard time when I do. But through being humble and being humbled by God a lot, you kind of learn that when you do fail, you're probably going to learn something out of it. So you get a positive out of the negative. So yeah, to answer that question, yeah, I do wish I had mentors. I still wish I had more mentorship now. Like, I'd crave it even more now than I probably did back then. I probably would have had, honestly, like back then, I probably just pushed it off and be like, nope, don't want anything to do with it. I want to do it my way. But now, as I understand like what God's trying to do in my life, and what I feel like He wants me to do in the future, whatever that is, that I do crave and want that mentorship from the church. And so that year in the School of Ministry was amazing. And so when I come back from Greenland, it was like, I have to get plugged. I have to go to church. I have to serve. Because I knew I did not want to go back to what I used to do, which would have been like, I'm just going to go to church this Sunday. Well, I don't have anything to do this Sunday, so I'm not going to go. And honestly, like, I don't know if it's the right way, but it's what makes me get up on Sunday morning like, I have to go to church, because I'm teaching fourth graders this morning, and they're relying on me to teach them. And if I'm not there, they're going to ask me where I was at last Sunday, and I have to explain it. And so they hold me accountable. And when I got to serve with the groups ministry, when I was doing the School of Ministry, it was just great to be doing something like being plugged in and serving, not yourself. You're serving other people. You're serving Him, most importantly, in His kingdom. And it's just, when I went through that, I think that's kind of what, if I'm being honest, like, I think that's why in the end, the pilot life was not fulfilling to me, because it wasn't serving the kingdom. It was serving a corporation, and I didn't like that. And being in the military, I felt like I was serving a bigger purpose there, serving our country. And now being, a government employee, still serving the military, I still find satisfaction and joy in that, because I feel like I'm doing something for that, not just some corporation. I'm serving our country still. And so I like that, but I do certainly feel like I want to serve His kingdom, and I really feel like you figure that out as you grow as a Christian, that like, there's more important things in this world than serving some company or serving yourself. It's really serving Him. So,
yeah, it's working towards the eternal.
Yeah. Store up treasures in heaven, not here on earth, kind of thing. You know, and not to say that I'm doing it for that. By any means, I don't do it just to store up treasures in heaven. I do it because that's what I want to do, and that's what I feel like He's called me to do. And I feel like that's what we should do. That's what the only reason I have a breath in my lungs today is because He allows it.
Yeah.
And so what am I going to do with that? Do I get it right most days? Nope, I do not. But I try, and that's all I can do, so, but yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Any way that we can pray for you?
Yeah, I would just say, praying for all my boys. Noah's the only one that I know for sure who's given his life to him. He's my youngest one. He's been saved, he's been baptized, and it was the greatest moment in a dad's life to see his son be baptized. I think that was last year, if I remember right. But I would love for my other boys to just be open to it more. They're rebellious. Again, I go back and we're talking about me in my middle school years, my high school years, where I just wasn't doing it. I know, again, I just trust God's timing, but definitely be praying for all of them to just open their hearts and just be open to it, I guess, really to whatever, to their salvation, of course, but whatever God's got for them in their lives. And then Rachel, for her health, she's dealing with some things, and it's been a struggle, but I don't know what God's using that for yet, but I know he's using it for something. So we know in the end that it's all going to work out, but just be praying for her health. And those really be the main things I would be saying to pray for if we could. But
okay.
Yeah.
Do you want to pray right now?
Sure. Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Do you want me to pray? Or?
Yeah. Why don't you, and then I'll pray too.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
We'll do. Oh, dear Heavenly Father, I just thank you so much for this time. Just thank you for, I guess really just thank you for my story. God, I wouldn't be here if it weren't for you, and the things that I've been able to share today wouldn't be able to share it if it weren't for you. And so, Lord, I just thank you so much. Number one, for allowing me to be here, and number two, for my salvation, Lord, and all of our salvations, Lord. I just thank you so much that you died on the cross to save us. And God, I just thank you so much just for all the blessings that you've given me and being there in the valleys through it all. And so, Lord, I just pray for my boys that as they grow up, that hopefully that they see a little bit of you through me. And if they don't, God, I just pray they see it somewhere. That they'll just come to know you and know that you did the same thing for them that you've done for me, and that you just died for them, and that you'll just be waiting for them. And God, I just trust your timing and know that if it's your will, that you'll call them to be a part of your kingdom. And so, Lord, I just pray also for my wife, Rachel, that everything that's been going on with her medical, God, we know there's a purpose in it all, and we might not know it this side of heaven, but God, again, we know that you're perfect and that you have a perfect plan, and we trust that. But Lord, in this time, I just pray that, God, you just be with her, just to help her get some answers and to make sure that to get all this stuff under control and really just hopefully just take the stress off of her so she doesn't have to worry about it much anymore, and just help her to get back to a way of life that that just brings her peace and happiness and joy. And so, Lord, again, I just thank you for everything. Lord, thank you for Caleb and his ministry. Thank you for this time to be able to come together just to share my story. And thank you for all the stories that have already been shared and the ones that will be shared in the future, Lord, that they just bring honor, glory, and praise to you and your name. And just pray for Caleb's family as well, for his wife and his daughters, and Lord, just for their whole family, Lord. And it's in Jesus' name that I pray.
And Father God, I just thank you for Josh here and for his family, and Lord, just his story, his how you have always been there through his entire life. And it's so cool to be able to look back and see those moments in our lives that you were there, even when we didn't know it at the time. So, Lord, I just thank you for your story that you've written in his life. And Father, I just pray especially for his sons, that, Lord, that you would open their eyes to the truth of who you are, and that you would reveal yourself to them in just such an incredible way, and that through Josh and Rachel's examples and how they've lived their lives, that they would see the love of Jesus Christ just through them, that they would be a light for them. And Father, we pray for Rachel too, just the different medical stuff, Lord. I know we don't know what's going on, but you do. And Father, I just ask for healing over her body, and I think just especially as Josh said, just kind of getting back to a normal way of life that is so important. And so, Lord, we ask these things too in the name of Jesus. Lord, you are in complete control. You are sovereign. And Father, I know that you love us so very much and you want the best things for us. And so, Lord, we rest in your sovereignty and in your love. And we thank you for Jesus. In his name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Cool.
Yeah.
Right on.
Thanks, man.
No, thank you.
Yeah.
Second time's a charm.
Yeah, I think I hope it works out.
Praise God! What a great testimony. If you want to hear more testimonies just like this, subscribe to the channel and watch another video. We've got new testimonies every single week. This is the Jesus Shift podcast. My name is Caleb Hurley. God bless and have a great rest of your day.